All right, everybody, good morning. How are you all doing? Well, so it's brilliant to be here. Thank you so much for having me here. And of course, someone who is not actually really part of the policing world, but someone who, in another think tank, Demos, has been working over the last kind of 4 or 5 years ago, really trying to understand how social media is changing society, trying to understand all the new challenges that it's throwing at us, trying to get a handle on how institutions, including the police, of course, but how politics needs to change too, and really trying to flag all that up. So it's a pleasure to be here, and what I'm going to try and do over the next 20 minutes or so is try to fulfil what Rick asked me to do, which was to try and map, at least from my opinion, from the kind of think tank digital researcher opinion, the kind of territory in this area, and the territory and all the crucial questions and the topographies and unanswered challenges which really exist around the idea of public safety in the digital age. So, just a very brief introduction of who on earth I am and what on earth Chasm is. So we set up Chasm kind of 5 years ago at Demos, and half of the people there are kind of composed of people like me. We either came out of government or out of the civil service or out of academia, kind of social scientists, social researchers. The other half of us are technologists. They are data scientists, they are visualization experts, they are algorithmists, they are natural language processing specialists. And what we've basically tried to do is try to wrap together all these new amazing ways that we have of trying to understand society with those that are used to trying to do research which actually is practically useful, which actually can try and answer specific questions we have now about things which we have to do something about now. So, all right, we'll begin our journey over all these challenges then. So I'll begin with the most familiar, and that is, of course, how the rise of the digital world has become a new venue for crime. We've seen the rise of new kinds of crimes entirely, things like hacking, of course, revenge pornography, and we're seeing crimes being done in entirely old crimes, whatever they are, harassment or breach of a court order being done in new ways online. And I wanted to jump in first just to show you a specific example of a particular kind of crime that we've been trying to measure ourselves, and that is digital hate. So we've been working with the Metropolitan Police Service and others as part of the kind of Police Knowledge Fund to actually try and understand how much hateful stuff is genuinely happening on social media. Who does it tend to happen to? When does it tend to happen? Who tends to be victimised? What can we actually do about it? So this is a map of the UK, of course. Right, each of those little blue dots that are going to come up on that map is what we think is a hateful anti-Islamic tweet. Now, this is not an easy task. So we've had to build a big architecture of loads of different algorithms all chunking away, spitting out different results, gobbling up the results of others, and overall turning an enormous deluge of information which is going into a thankfully much smaller kind of deluge, still a deluge going out of stuff which we think is derogatory, hateful, and acutely Islamophobic and anti-Islamic. Some of this is spiralling off into the digital ether. Some of this is people just kind of shouting into the wilds of Twitter. This one is based on Twitter data. Some of this is being directed at an individual, at a Muslim, sometimes being directed at someone who we know is probably not a Muslim but is nevertheless itself anti-Islamic. Some of this is being done in the middle of an argument. Some of this is done in a way which is totally unbidden, totally unsolicited. The Brussels attacks happen in the middle of this video I'm about to show you. Can you guess when they are? And this begins to show, I think, the kind of changing nature of crime as it moves on to social media. So some of this, by the way, is not criminal, of course. I think we deal with quite a large section of like sub-criminal, incredibly nasty, but not, in my understanding, actually breaching the criminal threshold stuff, which is hateful, socially problematic, desperately worrying, desperately hurtful to people that receive it, but not actually in and of itself a crime. Actually, I mean, don't get me started on the laws around hate crime on social media at the moment. I mean, I have no idea, and I don't think many people do, exactly what act actually even really applies to half of this stuff. Is it Public Order Act? Is it Harassment Act? Is it Malicious Communications Act, and so on? But so that's happened. That's just been, the Brussels attack happens right in the middle of that. It's in a diagram kind of showing that. Brussels attacks happen, a low level of conversation suddenly explodes. We call this a kind of digital aftermath. Suddenly, in the wake of that, people are suddenly being victimised. Now, the nature of this, of course, I mean, that was just showing you the UK, is that 10,000 British citizens could have been victimised by one person outside of the UK. They could all have been sent something technically illegal, hateful, from someone who sits outside of British jurisdiction. 10,000 people that sit outside of jurisdiction could all have sent one British citizen something which was illegal, something which was incredibly hateful, something which makes that person very, very vulnerable. And all of this could have been happening both out behind the walls of encryption, something I'm not actually going to mention again, but I will mention an incredibly important technological trend in a second, which I think really needs to be on everyone's radar. But also in a jurisdiction of which the British police had little relationship, if any. So a new venue for new kinds of crimes, a new venue for old crimes being done in new ways. Of course, I think this is the most familiar to everyone in this room. But I think it is one that is, of course, formidably difficult to try and get heads around and to understand how we can actually investigate and prosecute in ways which are reasonably effective, especially at scale. But second is the way in which social media actually changes how society works, and it is. It's changing who we think we are, it's changing the identities that we hold, it's changing the political affiliations that we have, it's changing the problems that we think exist out there in society, it's changing how we think we can go about and fix those problems. It's changing what researchers like me would call the processes, the kind of like dynamics or tipping points of society. All of this is a massive agent of social change. That is changing society across the board, of course. It's changing everything from how we participate in politics to who we know, who we fall in love with. But it is also changing some of the drivers, the underlying societal dynamics, which can drive crimes of various types. And the first kind of way in which it's changing society is this, the echo chamber. So I always feel like a weatherman when I try and explain this, but I'll try and explain what on earth you were seeing there. Does anyone have an idea? Absolutely no idea. Brilliant. All right, so every tiny little dot in this map is a Twitter account. And the location, this is everybody that got involved in the general election of last year. I will tweet this image out afterwards. No need to take a photo. Who got involved in the political debate last year during the general election. Now, the location of every one of these tiny dots depends on who they followed and who they tended to chat to. We have vastly different experiences on social media. We have vastly different experiences for different reasons, but one of them is who we surround ourselves with. They have become the new gatekeepers for information from us. The editor, the anthologist, the academic, these people that used to make professional decisions on our behalf about what could or couldn't enter the public space, and at least partly made that decision on the basis of what they thought was a good or bad fact. They've been washed away in a kind of sea of user-generated content. The new gatekeepers are, of course, ourselves, but then also the people that we surround ourselves with. Those who you follow on Twitter, or on Facebook, on Telegram, or anything else. These are the people through which you now see the world. Well, what we found out is when we exploded out this big map. So these people tend to have quite similar online experiences. Right? I mean, we follow each other, we speak to each other online, we'll be close together in this network graph. Those that have nothing to do with each other are far apart. So this basically is trying to model information flows. It's what we researchers call ideational propagation. How does ideas spread in the online space? When you actually look at what happens here, of course you see something really important, which is you've got a big Labour belt there up at the top, big, active, the party, the volunteers, online as offline. You've got a kind of media belt in the middle. They're in the middle because they're basically mentioning all political parties in reasonable amounts. You've got a kind of tight, bright, angry UKIP cluster there. You've got a Scottish conversation happening entirely into itself. These people actually have very little to do with the mainstream British political conversation that's going on. And the key lesson is that information flows are highly partisan, which means we live in echo chambers. So when you log online, it's likely that you're going to have the same basic worldview that you have reflected back at you in thousands of different ways. The Labour activists get a Labour worldview. They basically really only see Labour stuff. They only see stuff which is supportive of Labour. Likewise UKIP, likewise Scotland. Now, this doesn't have to be political. We see echo chambers emerging online in all different kinds of spaces. It can be having a conspiracy theory. It could be really hating the police. It could be thinking that all government politicians are corrupt. There are lots of echo chambers out there, but what they are doing is they're allowing small subcultures to begin to float away from the mainstream, to begin to seal themselves off from dissenting facts, from information which might instill some doubt. That reduces skepticism, so people are becoming more and more hardened in their own belief. They're becoming more and more sure that the beliefs that they hold are the right ones. And it's also increasing antipathy towards opponents. So whilst once in this kind of halcyon days of past yore, before the big bad internet came along, people, we think, and to some extent it was true, we could hold legitimate disagreements in common spaces which were civil. Those things are increasingly being reduced and made difficult because people are increasingly thinking that because they're getting the same worldview reflected back at them, the people that must hold another worldview, attitudinally, they're thinking these increasingly are either ignorant, they cannot have the right facts at their fingertips, or in fact they're increasingly thinking these people are evil. The reason that they are holding their worldview is because of some kind of malicious, self-interested reason. It's not only they don't have the facts; they're also they're not even on the same side. They don't even want society to get better. So this is I think incredibly worrying in the way it's driving polarisation of lots of different kinds of belief, and I think this is going to drive a lot of political turmoil over the next few years, and I think it's going to drive a lot of turmoil between different groups and between people with different backgrounds and different ways of seeing the world. So that's driver number one. Driver number two is online disinhibition. There is something the researchers call the online disinhibition effect. In essence, it is that when you talk to one another, you do it much more rudely if you put a computer between you. So as society becomes increasingly used to talking to other people with a computer in the middle, this online disinhibition effect is going to become more and more powerful. There's lots of kind of reasons we think why this happens. Like partly it's you lose the human cues. The other person is a human being, so you don't actually get reminded that the person that you're yelling at on social media is actually got feelings and hopes and dreams and fears just like you. Partly it's actually got to do with the kind of norms of the space itself. I mean, we have a generation of people that are now using social media. They never got taught how to use social media responsibly. They never got taught what the norms on social media would be. I mean, a bugbear of mine is that when we have to start addressing these things is that nobody is being actually taught how to be good citizens online as well as offline. Digital citizenship is a concept which we badly need, which we almost entirely at the moment lack. And online disinhibition is a really important reason why we need this. And then we've got reciprocal radicalisation. So it has never been easier, not only to find people that you agree with reference back to the echo chambers, but it's never been easier to find people you massively disagree with as well. So if you are a radical Islamist, you want to find a member of the far right, you are one click away from that. Likewise, if you are a hardcore eco-activist and you want to find a member of Shell, you can find them in an instant. Now, what we are increasingly seeing is that groups that sit on the radical polar opposites of any particular issue, any particular political debate that's happening, or any particular social scandal, say, they are increasingly actually dealing with each other online. So they are firing stuff back and forth. They are cherry-picking what the other side is doing it. They're throwing it into their own echo chamber as example, yet another example about why these other people can't be reasoned with, can't be reckoned with. So this is a really crucial driver as well, that basically groups are now better able to wind each other up. I mean, basically, it's like there's counter demonstrations happening on the streets between, say, anti-fascists and the BNP, but it's happening online all of the time. So this is itself, I think, quite a radicalising trend which social media is allowing to kind of get bigger. And then lastly, I talked about how the gatekeepers are being washed away. I think the last driver is really simply that we are never going to be able to control the information which is available to people now. Now, Twitter, Facebook have been making huge efforts in doing this, first with child abuse images, then with terrorist exploitation of the internet. At the moment, they're playing whack-a-mole with probably about 100,000 different ISIS accounts that are jumping up and being shut down and jumping up again. It's an arms race. But even if those big platforms are making some headway, there's always going to be something like Telegram, which is going to be much less capable of getting that information off. The brutal hard logic which society is going to have to deal with is that it's much, much easier to upload a piece of content than to ever take it off. It's much easier to set an account up than it is to set one down. Still they've never been public about how many people really do this. I think it's like to be thousands. Every time Facebook or Twitter receive a request for something, this is hateful, this is misogynistic, this is Islamophobic, this is an abusive image or so on. certain technical kind of techniques aside, they've got to go through, and it's got to go through a checking process, and a human being has to refer it to content policy, and in that time you can upload 10 new pieces of content. Basically, we are one click away from either a terrorist world or hateful world, which is rumbling away, largely invisible to most of us as we go about living our online lives, but it's rumbling away there with fair amount of impunity, which is available for people to find. Now, I'm worried about all of that. I'm worried about the nature of the new venue for crimes. I'm worried about the new drivers that the rise of social media, the rise of the digital world is introducing into society and changing the way that it works. But I'm also worried about what's coming next. Because, and this is, I think, really key, like there is, from what I'm hearing, I mean, Internet of Things is going to be important. I think we are increasingly understanding what that means. But that when I speak to technologists, when I speak to all the people in the kind of, hacker collectives and all the people that are innovating and wanting to remake the internet, that is not what they're most excited about. They're talking about something called Web 3.0. They think it's time for the internet to evolve, and they think they have got the tools to make it evolve. And this is what they call Web 3.0, web decentralization. So we are all familiar with these huge platforms. Many police services have very good relationships with these social media platforms. If there is a big problem, you can pick up the phone, and there is somebody on the other end of it with these with these big social media platforms. Twitter, Google+, Qzone, LinkedIn, vContact, Orkut, and all the others. These are all large companies. They are effectively commercial entities, primarily the top ones either based in the US or China, that basically have to operate under legal jurisdiction. So in that sense, yes, they're dealing with a digital world which is massive and difficult to understand, but there is actually no kind of fundamental change in how that happens to how we police lots of other companies. But these technologists working towards Web 3.0 right now basically see us all as being the digital serfs labouring on the marvellous estates of these enormous tech giants. These are, by the way, along with Apple and Google, the largest companies that have ever existed. And there's plenty of people that want to liberate the internet from them. They never thought that the internet was going to be about that. They complain that we've turned the internet into a giant shopping mall. Well, they are basically trying to get away from the centralised model of, say, social media or watching videos online. I mean, imagine almost any internet service here. Banking, loans, insurance, they're working on all of these. They want to get away from that centralised model. They want to get rid of that middle. They want to get towards a decentralised internet where there's loads of different nodes, and they want to get to a complete distributed internet where there is in fact no centre at all. There is no company at its heart. Now, the implication of this for something like social media, if they could create a social media platform where there is no company in the middle of it, I think is incredibly important, incredibly consequential, I think, for the police and for government. Now, the technology they're doing this with is essentially called either distributed ledger technology or blockchain. Have you heard of blockchain? Yeah, I mean, it's the technology that Bitcoin is based on. And basically, as soon as Bitcoin became public and widely used, the kind of adage by the Bitcoiners was, Bitcoin's not what it's about blockchain. And the idea was that blockchain would open up, basically would allow a network to function without a company in the middle. The way it does this is difficult to explain. I don't even really understand the full mathematics of this. It's reliant on cryptography, but what it basically allows happen is that whole network to police each other. It allows that network to make sure that everyone else is following the rules. You don't need a Facebook in the middle to make sure that you friended that person in the right way, to make sure that image is being cleaned off. You don't even need it for the technical function of a social media platform. And it's happening now. So Steam is a blockchain-based social media platform. They're doing there's more than one reason why. Some of the people doing this are kind of politically hostile to the idea of large tech giants. Some people simply see this as a commercial opportunity. Others basically think that the way that you're going to compete with a Facebook or a Twitter now is by giving people both more rewards for their data and more control over their data. And blockchain allows all of that to happen. So Steam is one example, Diaspora is another one. And when you put all of these things together, I'm really worried that there is an enforcement crisis on the horizon. I'm worried that at the same time as the digital world is getting more and more important for people, as we load more of our lives on it and therefore can be hurt more on it, hurt more reputationally, hurt more financially, hurt more socially by things that can happen to us on there, is exactly at the moment when, if Web 3.0 really does actually crawl out of Xbox and become widespread, I mean, there's a blockchain-based social media platform with over 1 million users, so this is not like kind of like pie in the sky. I mean, this stuff is being used, if only on a smaller scale at the moment. But I'm worried that as the importance of the digital world goes up, so the capacity of law enforcement agencies to actually police that place is actually at the same time going down. I'm just going to run through very quickly. I know I'm probably running out of time here. Completely, I'm being told to run. Right, very quickly. So blockchain Web 3.0 is a major challenge. The second major challenge is, of course, scale. Stephen already ran through the figures, but it's worthwhile just having a look. This is as we're talking, these are the amount of messages that are being sent on social media right now. Like there is no way to explain how large social media in the digital world really is. It is beyond the capacity of our tiny human biological minds to really get our mind around those figures. But there you go, kind of 10 million. 10 million just in the time that we were talking. So scale is obviously going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue when the police try and get a handle on hate crime online. It's already an issue when it happens with online fraud. Scale is going to just be overwhelming. Equally overwhelming is that actually the police getting out there, being proactive, actually finding crimes as well as simply dealing with all the complaints which they receive, which I think is going to be massively important as well when it comes to actually extending the law into social media. Well, you think it's a needle in the haystack problem. You think it's finding that tiny criminal content in that washing concourse of normal social usage, but it's not. It's finding a bit of hay in the haystack. That needle is no different technologically, from any other of the other bits of hay. It's just an illegal bit of hay. And that bit of hay is hiding in that huge haystack. And, speaking as someone that's having to build all these algorithms, trying to find things like anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, not even to a criminal threshold, and certainly not I'd ever get up in a court of law and say that those numbers were entirely correct. Absolutely not. But even then, I can tell you it is a formidably difficult technical task. It is really, really, really difficult. We've already mentioned extraterritoriality. I think that will come up more time and time again. So here we go, signing off then. I'm worried that the confidence of people in the police protecting them as much in the online space as they do in the offline one is diminishing. It's not diminishing through, I think, any fault of the police. It's diminishing because in policing terms, the rise of the digital world has happened in the blink of an eye. And it's produced all these challenges across every different part of policing. It needs all these new skills and technologies, processes, everything else. It's fundamentally hostile to the idea of territorially based constabularies. And what we are seeing, which I think is most worrying of all, is a kind of increase in online vigilantism at the same time. So this has gone up sharply over the last few years. This is online vigilantism to try and catch paedophiles. That's led to suicides. Doxing, outing, the idea of trying to expose people online and then say who they are offline and then give them, make public their address and make public who they know. This is happening more and more and more and more. And this is what I think a real danger is that people are going to take kind of policing and kind of protecting themselves and protecting others in the online world into their own hands. I think that, that's it. I mean, I've gone over time. Thank you so much for your attention, everybody.